Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Before we start with our today's session, we have an announcement. Byju's IAS is conducting a free workshop which is scheduled to be conducted on 24th October 2021. What is this workshop on? This will be a workshop giving you an idea about the strategy for preparation, tips and guidelines how you have to prepare for the year 2022. This will be scheduled on 24th and will be conducted by Mukesh Jha. How to register? Follow the link given in the description box, give the necessary information and you would be able to attend this free workshop conducted by Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says development that is mindful of nature. The article here evaluates the linkage between development and environmental degradation in Kerala. The author points out two important questions. Has Kerala achieved development at the cost of the environment? Is it possible for the people of Kerala to select an alternative path where there is development but not degradation of the environment but sustainable development? So the author points out yes, there is degradation of the environment. This should not be happening at the cost of the environment. So he suggests alternative means and mechanisms to ensure that there is sustainable development. Let us try and understand what is this author trying to convey. We have the state of Kerala, which is called as the God's own country. It is known for its green cover. It is known for its forest areas as well. It is also known for its tourism. But whenever there is large amount of rainfall that occurs in this particular region, because of the terrain, because of the topography, it also results in landslides and floods in the state of Kerala. So what does happen? Because of the heavy rains, landslides occurs. Because of landslides and floods, there is loss in the economy. People also lose their lives as well, and ultimately there is a larger impact of the environmental degradation. If we have to look into the recent incidences, we have heavy rains that have caused landslides in Kottayam and Idukki. This happens to be two places which are majorly hit by landslides and floods. What happens as a result of which there is loss of lives. 42 deaths were recorded in these two places, and if you consider the population density of Kerala, it is about 860 persons per square kilometer against an all India average of 368 persons per square kilometer according to the census 2011. So if such incidents occur in the state of Kerala, this might also impact large number of people. Why? Because the population density is comparatively more in the state of Kerala. So what is population density? It is the number of people who live in an area. So an average is considered. According to it, more people live in a particular area in Kerala. So a landslide or a disaster may impact more number of people, and of late what we are witnessing is change in the land use pattern in Kerala. So what is the author saying? The author is saying when you look into the traditional setup or the society in Kerala, people were living in the coastal plain. They were living in the adjoining lowlands. They were also part of the midlands as well. But because the state has seen an exponential growth in the form of development, people who were along all these areas have now moved to highlands. So originally, traditionally, historically, they were concentrated along these areas of coastal plains, adjoining lowlands and midlands, but now they have moved to highlands. So once they move to highlands, what happens? They require houses. So what do? They go about building the residential buildings. So what would happen? What we need is development of infrastructure. Roads have to come into picture. At what cost? Felling of trees. That is where those areas which had the green cover in Kerala have now led to the road of deforestation, and ultimately the trees are chopped. When the trees are chopped, what would happen? There is instability in that region. This will obviously cause soil erosion in that particular region. How? If there are trees in that region, it is stable enough. It is able to withstand the soil. It is also able to withstand the pressure in that system. But if there is excessive rainfall, what would happen? The trees are already chopped off. The trees are not acting as the barrier. The tree is not protecting the soil cover, and as a result, there is large slush of water that immediately rushes across, creating what is called as panic in that region. So what is happening here? Whenever there are people who are moving up the highlands, what we will see is more developmental activities resulting in building of the residential buildings. What we require is more construction materials, high growth of residential buildings, and this will ultimately mean more infrastructural support. Human activities like quarrying and unscientific cutting will take place, resulting in loss of economic activity as well as deaths in this particular region. Added to these issues, there are other geographical phenomena that also take place in the state of Kerala. What happens? The basic characteristics of the rivers also change whenever there is a development of a project. Let's say, for example, this is a river, so there is water flowing in this particular region. But what if we are constructing a particular tourist center? There would be number of resorts that would come up along the border areas or the basins of the rivers. So what would they do? They also go up and push this particular area, so there is change in the basic characteristics of the rivers. Earlier, this particular river used to follow this border, but now we have entered into this area as well. So whenever there is more rainfall in this region, the earlier channel would take place, and this could be a disaster to the people who have built resorts or residential complexes in this region. Added to this, the water absorbing capacity of the river catchment is also lost as well, and ultimately the groundwater recharge in and around the basin of the river is also lost. So what we see is depreciation in the state of Kerala because of the economic related activity, because of the infrastructural development, and also because of tourist related activity, which is not taking into picture the sustainable development. Development is good. Yes, we all want to grow. Yes, we all require development in the state. Yes, we want growth in the state as well, adding up to the numbers in the economy, but this should be sustainable and should not be at the cost of the environment. When we look into the flaws that have been existing in the system, we have to look at the building plans. What happens? You have the government which has made some stringent rules and regulations. These stringent rules and regulations are obviously on the paper, but when it comes to the implementation, they are not meeting the parameters, they are not sticking to the rules and regulations. Ultimately, we can call it a toothless tiger on the paper, or you can call it as a paper tiger as well, because the rules are strict, but ultimately when it comes to the actual execution of these laws, they are not able to meet the required standard. One such example that we can discuss is about the coastal regulation zone. The government of India has a clear-cut coastal regulation zone. The state also has rules and regulations in order to implement it, but what is happening in state of Kerala? One such example that we can speak of is the Marudu flat demolition. What happens? Supreme Court order demolition of apartments in Marudu, and as a result, large number of apartments had to be demolished. What was happening there? Building plans were present, stringent action plans were present. In spite of it, there was a political business nexus, permission was given, and ultimately they violated the coastal regulation zone. Looking at this, the Supreme Court enters into the picture and asks for demolition of all these apartments built along the coastal areas. Such has been the case in some of the regions in Kerala where there are laws, there are rules, there are regulations, but ultimately when it comes to the ground reality, there is a cost benefit analysis which is not taken into picture by the state government. Added to this, when we speak about the Western Ghats, we have the Gadgil Committee, which has also clearly pointed that not much economic activities has to be taken in the Western Ghats, but the government has also given permission to tourist activities, developmental activities, mining activities, quarrying and construction activities. Ultimately, there is development, but this is at the cost of the environment. So who is the sufferer? It is us who will be the sufferers. Who will be the sufferer? It is the future generation which will be the sufferer. And is this right? Asks the author. Further, the author discusses two important projects that is taking place in the state of Kerala. One, he speaks about the Silver Line project which is being undertaken by the state government in Kerala. Added to this, widening of the highway that has been initiated by the central government. What is the Silver Line project? When we speak about the Silver Line project, what is it? It is a railway project. It is a connectivity project. From where to where? From the southern part of Kerala, that is the capital of Kerala, Thiruvananthapuram, to the northern part of Kerala, that is the Kasargod. So what is happening? There is development of the railway infrastructure with the Silver Line project. This is a very good initiative. What are the advantages? One, people would be able to reach from Thiruvananthapuram to Kasargod in about 4 hours. Currently, if we look into this infrastructure that is already in existing, the railway tracks that are present, it takes about 12 hours. So what is happening with the new infrastructure project? It will reduce the time. It will obviously reduce the congestion on the roads, and it will also reduce the traffic on the existing railway lines. These are some of the advantages. But what is the author asking? The author is asking, in this particular case, there are other areas which the Kerala government has to focus on. What is it? Kerala already has a very good transportation system, but Kerala has to focus on power generation. It has to speak about urban infrastructure. What it requires is a well-trained workforce, and added to this, the sewage disposal system is the need of the hour. Why not focus on these domains, but why is the government focusing on the transportation sector? The author also says there is already an existing railway infrastructure. It may take about 12 hours to reach from Thiruvananthapuram to Kasargod. There is already prevalence of an existing infrastructure. If we are reducing the time to about 4 hours, what is the advantage that we are able to generate? If these are the only two advantages, it is not worth it, but instead the government has to focus on other areas, says the author. Next, the author speaks about the widening of the highway. We have the central government which has taken up this initiative. What is it doing? It is widening the road infrastructure. Whenever there is widening of the infrastructure, it obviously means that there is a tree cover, the green cover, the trees are chopped off, and at the same time there are houses in and around this particular area. These houses are also have to be destroyed as well. If people have to give up their houses, has the government taken their permission? Has they entered into stakeholder approach where their voices are also heard? In case people's voice are heard, then in such a situation, the green cover will not completely be taken off, and these people would not want the roads at the cost of the environment and the personal houses as well. So what is happening here? At the larger level, we have the development of infrastructure, which is good, but it is not sustainable. This is resulting in environmental degradation. So the government has to look into the cost benefit analysis. It is not only about immediate effects that it leads to, immediate advantages, but a large scale weakness in the near future will also have to be looked into picture, and environmental impact assessment will have to be conducted, and only then the government will have to initiate such a process, says this article. In the near future, if the government is giving permission to any of the projects, either of the infrastructure, either of the tourism development, or any infrastructure where it is about felling of trees or changing the structure in that particular area, in all those cases, technical expertise committee will have to be appointed. So what is this technical expertise committee? Basically, you will have the people who will understand what is the environmental all about. The earth scientists come into picture, public policy experts will come into picture, elected representatives, the MPs, the MLAs, and ultimately the citizens' voice are also heard. Take their viewpoint and then come up with the policy initiatives for the development. So basically, deforestation, urbanization, increase of the agriculture into those areas where forests were present, tourism have eroded the capacity of the state of Kerala, and they are not able to withstand extreme weather events. So what we have to do is course correction during this process, says the author. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says a clean energy transition plan for India. The article here is speaking about energy security. How is that India would be able to provide energy to the people in the country, and at the same time, how is it going to mitigate the impact of climate change? Let us try and understand what is this article all about. When it comes to the power generation in the country, what is the major source of power generation? It happens to be coal. In the past 15 years, we have seen a drastic increase when it comes to the output from the coal power generation. Added to this, there are other sources of power generation as well. It can be nuclear, it can be renewable, but the majority, that is more than 50%, is still accommodated from the coal. This leads to an important point about energy security. What is energy security? Energy security is about providing energy, providing electricity, providing power to the people in the country. And this power should be affordable as well. It is just not about providing electricity to the people, but they should also be able to afford the electricity. So energy security is about providing power, electricity to the people at affordable prices. Yes, we are able to provide power to the people, but whenever we make use of coal, what happens? There is excessive release of the greenhouse gases. This also leads to environmental pollution. This also leads to air pollution as well. This also means increased cost of electricity. Why? Because indirectly it is also harming the environment. So what is happening? If we speak about power generation, there are two objectives that the government will have to look into. One is it has to provide energy to the people, and at the same time the energy generated should not cause much of environmental pollution. These two things will have to be catered if power is generated in the country. However, what we have is two primary objectives. One, yes, we can make use of the power generation which is in the form of traditional thermal power plants. What are these thermal power plants? These are the thermal power plants which have been in existence from a very long period of time. What do we mean by it? These are the power plants established by the government, established by the private companies. They have been operated in that region for more than 2 to 3 decades. So these are the old thermal power plants. If we take into picture from the last few years, the amount of power generated from the coal, it has increased in India. The statistical evidence says so. It was about 94 gigawatts that was generated in 2011, and this has increased to about 192 gigawatts between March 2011 and 2017. So what is happening here? The amount of power generated by the coal thermal power plants is comparatively increased over a period of time. But what is the problem with respect to these thermal power plants? If we speak about these traditional historical ones which have been operated from a very long time, what is happening? They make use of lot of coal. So when we make use of lot of coal, the amount of energy or the electricity that is generated with the unit of coal is comparatively less. So on one side, we are making use of too much of coal to produce 1 unit of electricity, let's assume by hypothetical numbers, and at the same time these traditional ones, that is the thermal power plants which are in existence from a very long time, also has environmental cost as well. So what it means is it is harming the environment, and at the same time the cost of production is also more. But what we require is energy in the form of thermal power plants, because the other sources of energy, for example the renewable energy or the nuclear energy, is yet not able to provide this much amount of energy to the people. Added to this, when we speak about thermal power energy, what happens? It is easily available. We can also import from other countries. We also have the availability of coal in India as well, and production cost is comparatively cheaper. On one side, what happens is there is environmental cost, and at the same time more coal is used, which happens to be the disadvantage. But the advantage is it is cheaper compared to the other sources of energy. So what we have is coal which is being used, and this coal is able to generate the electricity in India. Then there are other sources of energy, that happens to be the variable renewable energy. And in this variable renewable energy, we have the solar, We also have the wind as well. We have the government of India taking up the initiative. One, the government has come up with multiple policies, and at the same time, the government has also given the push to the renewable energy sector. But what is the problem with the renewable energy? The problem with the renewable energy sector is the cost. What is happening? The cost of production is comparatively more in comparison to the coal. Yes, it is advantageous for us. Why? Because it is able to reduce the impact of environmental pollution, but the problem is the cost is comparatively more in comparison to the previously established thermal power plants. So on one side you have thermal power plants which have been in existence for 30 years or more. There the cost is comparatively less, but they are environmentally degrading. But when it comes to the renewable energy, the cost is comparatively more, but the advantages, they are not harming the environment. So what we require is a combination of both of this. So a combination of these is what is called as high efficiency low emission technology. So what is this all about? As the very name denotes, there is high efficiency. What is high efficiency? As I originally discussed, when it comes to the traditional thermal power plants, they make use of lot of coal to generate the electricity. But when it comes to the new technologies that are built, what happens? There is less consumption of coal with same amount of output. So less coal, more the productivity, and at the same time there is low emissions as well. So these traditional thermal plants which did not have much better technology were able to produce and generate electricity, but it was also harming the environment. But now we have much better technology that is used for power generation. Such technologies will have to be used is what the author is speaking about. So if we are making use of new technology which is called as high efficiency low emission technology, what are the advantages? One, it will help in reducing the fuel consumption. How? Because the amount of fuel that is required for the generation of electricity is comparatively less. It will also reduce the non-greenhouse gases as well, and at the same time it will also reduce the CO2 emissions as well. So if we are replacing the historical traditional ones that is in existence for more than 30 years, the technology was not good, but you cannot completely replace them. So what you have to do is come up with an evolved technology, where this technology which is called as HELI or high efficiency low emission technology, if it is used in the thermal power plants, in such a situation it is making use of less coal, and at the same time the emissions are also comparatively less as well. So if we look into this particular image, it has three advantages. One, it will reduce the fuel consumption, reduce the greenhouse gases, and at the same time reduce the CO2 emissions as well. So when it comes to the power energy sector in India, we have three different stakeholders. One is the central government, then we have the state government, then we also have the private sector participation. And when it comes to the supply chain, what we have is generation unit, transmission unit, and distribution unit. So remember, all the three stakeholders are connected when it comes to the power sector, and there is a connection between generation to transmission to the distribution. This is the supply chain when it comes to the operational capabilities of the power generating units. Now if we go back to this article, it goes on to say that there are some traditional ones which have been in existence for the past few years. Such will have to be replaced by high efficiency low emission technologies. So progressive retirement of about 36 gigawatts of installed generation capacity in about 211 thermal power plants will have to be replaced, and this replacement will have to be taken up as soon as possible. So the author goes on to say that there are some thermal power plants which are operating for more than decades. They are not efficient. These will have to be replaced by newer thermal power plants which are efficient enough, have much better technology, so that they are able to reduce the cost, minimize the emissions of the particulate matter, save the coal consumption, water requirement, and ultimately ensure that India meets up to its energy security as well as meeting the standards of mitigating the impact of climate change. Therefore, the author simply goes on to say, with the adaptation of new technology, new advanced thermal power plants, we would be able to meet up to the energy security where power would be given to the people in the country, and at the same time we would be also be able to regulate the negative impacts of the climate change. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about general consent given to the Central Bureau of Investigation. Let us try and understand what is this consent that is given by the state governments to the Central Bureau of Investigation. We have the Central Bureau of Investigation, or the CBI, which is governed by the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act of 1946. There are three divisions in the Central Bureau of Investigation which carries three specialized operations. One, it has the Anti-Corruption Division, then it has the Economic Offences Division. Third, what we have is the Special Crimes Division. What is this Anti-Corruption Division? Basically, it looks into corruption scandals initiated by the public servants. In case there is a public servant who's involved himself in corruption, the Anti-Corruption Division or the wing investigates if the public servant has committed such a corruption or not. Then we have the Economic Offences Division. What will it investigate? Banking frauds, money laundering issue, and at the same time, if there are any black money operations that have taken place in the country, it is being investigated by the Economic Offences Division. Then we have the Special Crimes Division. What will it do? It will investigate cases of violence such as murder, crimes related to internal security such as espionage, so on and so forth. So these are the activities of the Central Bureau of Investigation. Why are we discussing this? This is where we have to understand a concept called as consent. Why consent? That is because when we look into the 7th schedule, what happens? You have the union list, you also have the state list, and you have the concurrent list. What happens in the state list? You have one of the items of the state list called as law and order. So who is in charge of law and order? It is the state government. So if there is any violation with respect to the law and order, it is the state police who report to the state government, who have to take into picture and ensure that there is public order. This is clearly defined in the 7th schedule. When we are speaking about the Central Bureau of Investigation, it can investigate any of the issues in the union territory. But if it is to investigate some of the issues as we just discussed in the state government, what it requires is consent from the state government. So what is consent here? Since law and order, public order is an issue of the state government will have to give permission to the Central Bureau of Investigation, approving that the Central Bureau of Investigation has the powers to investigate in that particular state. There are two types of consents. One is called as the general consent. The other is called as the specific consent. What is this general consent? This is the consent given by the state government to the Central Bureau of Investigation for about 6 months to 1 year. Again, after a considerable period of time, the state governments once again give permission to the Central Bureau of Investigation. So during this period, the CBI need not have to ask the permission from the state government. Then we have something called as the specific consent. What is the specific consent? Let's assume for a moment that general consent for a specific period, which is about 6 months or 1 year, is not given by the state government. In such a case, the CBI officials will not have the power to investigate any of the cases in that state. But if there is a case which it has to investigate to extract information for a specific case, state governments give permission. That is what is called a specific consent. So a specific consent is only for a specific case and not for a period. For general consent, it is for a period, but for specific consent, it is for a specific case. That is why it is called a specific consent. What is the law behind it? If you look into section 5 of the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act, the central government has the power to extend the jurisdiction of this agency to railway areas in a particular state. But if it has to investigate in a state, then the permission of the state government is required, which is what is called as the general consent as well as the specific consent. So consent is the permission given by the state government to the Central Bureau of Investigation to conduct an investigation in their states. But kindly remember, this is not an objective criteria. Let me explain this with the help of an example. We have the state government which has already given the general consent to the Central Bureau of Investigation. So the Central Bureau of Investigation is investing one of the cases. After some months, let's say for about 3 months, the government of a particular state withdraws this consent. So if the case is already being investigated by the Central Bureau of Investigation, the general consent won't matter, because such a consent withdrawal is only applicable for the prospective cases. So the CBI in the near future may not be able to investigate the future cases, but the already existing ones, that will be still investigated by the Central Bureau of Investigation. So it means that when the state withdraws that general consent, it is only applicable for the future cases, but not for the ones which are already being investigated by the Central Bureau of Investigation. Added to this, let's say for example, we have the constitutional courts. Which are the constitutional courts? We have the Supreme Court as well as the High Courts. If the Supreme Court or the High Court feel that the state police are not able to do justice, and it is the constitutional courts which have referred this case to the Central Bureau of Investigation, in such a case, the state's consent is once again not required, says the Supreme Court of India. So the two criteria that we just discussed, one about the constitutional courts and for the prospective case, has been discussed in Kazi Lendub Dorji versus the Central Bureau of Investigation and others in the year 1994. In this article, the West Bengal government had challenged the Central Bureau of Investigation's jurisdiction. Why? Because it had withdrawn the general consent. However, the central government has gone ahead and said that this is a constitutional court which has referred the case to the Central Bureau of Investigation. So the Central Bureau of Investigation is entitled to investigate such cases, says the Union government. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about Public Safety Act. We all know about one of the important articles in the Indian Constitution, which is Article 22. Article 22 in the Indian Constitution speaks about detention. There are two types of detention. One is the punitive detention. The other is the preventive detention. What is the punitive detention? Punitive detention is nothing but punishment. Punishment for what? A person has connected or done an illegal act because of which the person is entitled to be punished. So he would be put behind bars, he would be thrown into the prison, which is called as punishment or the punitive detention. Next, what we have is preventive detention. What is this preventive detention? This person has not committed any illegal act, but there is an apprehension that he might commit an act. So to prevent this act from being committed, the state, the executive authorities put this person in the prison for a temporary period of time for few days, which is called as preventive detention. So in preventive detention, it is not punishment, but preventing a person from conducting an offenses which is illegal in nature. In punitive detention, it is the punishment. In preventive detention, what is happening? The person has not committed a crime, but the executive is preventing such a person from committing a crime. So these are the two types of detention. Who can make laws when it comes to the preventive detention in India? We have the parliament which can make the laws. We also have the state legislature as well, which can also make laws. When it comes to the parliament, it has the exclusive authority. So it is only the parliament which should be able to make laws in certain domains. What are these domains? Let's say for example defense, or we speak about the external sector, that is the foreign affairs, or we speak about the security of the country. This domain is restricted to the parliament. However, the state legislature can also make laws for the preventive detention. Let's say for example, security of the state, maintenance of the public order, maintenance of supplies and essentials that is required for the community. In such a scenario, we have the state legislatures who would be able to make laws for the preventive detention in that state. Why are we discussing this? That is because one of the laws that the state legislatures in Jammu and Kashmir had initiated is what is called as the Public Safety Law. So the Jammu and Kashmir Public Safety Act was introduced in the year 1978, which is nothing but a preventive detention law initiated by the state legislature when in 1978 by the state of Jammu and Kashmir back then. Now, this law is also applicable to the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. When we go back to the history books, this was first promulgated back in the year 1978 by Sheikh Abdullah government. Why? Back then there was excessive case of smuggling that was happening. What we had was the timber smugglers. In order to prevent them from smuggling timber in the state of Jammu and Kashmir back then, this law was initiated. What are the features of this law? The Public Safety Act allows for the detention of a person without a formal charge and without trial. If a person has to be put behind bar, as we have just discussed, what we require is a trial process. This person has to be charge sheeted as well, where the police will go on an investigation, will say what are the crimes committed by this particular person. If he is arrested, he has to be put before the magistrate, before the court within the 24 hours. Such need not be done under the Public Safety Act. So the Public Safety Act does not have a formal charge and does not have the trial proceedings taking place. Who will pass orders under the Public Safety Act? It is the district magistrate. The district magistrate will get a dossier or a case file from the police officers. The district magistrate will go through this case file and it is he who decides whether Public Safety Act will have to be slapped against an individual or not. So the deputy commissioner can accept the recommendations or he can reject the recommendations of the police officers. What happens once this Public Safety Act is slapped against an individual? The DM will have to communicate to the person within 5 days in writing as to why such a person is arrested. In exceptional circumstances, he can also take 10 days to communicate these grounds. He also has the discretionary power to withdraw some information, not disclose all the facts if it is going to disturb the public tranquility or it will be a problem to the public at large. One of the draconian features of the Public Safety Act is that a maximum detention period of 2 years can also be taken up under this law. This is not under all circumstances, but the maximum detention period is as much as 2 years. What are the other concerns with respect to this legislation? The detained person, that is the person who is arrested, is put in the preventive detention mode, does not have any right to even move a bail application before the criminal court, and at the same time he cannot also engage any lawyer to represent him or her before the detaining authority. This means that the detainee will not be able to make use of the legal mechanism of habeas corpus, and in most of the cases the advisory body which has to give permission for the detainment of that person may not work in most of the cases, or even if it works, the advisory body may not act independently and may also listen to the executive evidence as well. In such a case, the habeas corpus, which is in Article 32, may not work efficiently, is what is that we have to understand with respect to the Public Safety Act. Now let's look into the next article. This article says fault lines grow deeper in Bangladesh. The article here is speaking about communal violence that is taking place in Bangladesh. We have discussed about this issue in our previous CNAs. But one of the things that the article speaks about is what were the objectives of these perpetrators of communal violence. They had two important objectives. One was to embarrass the Sheikh Hasina government. They wanted a political turmoil in Bangladesh, and at the same time, Sheikh Hasina government is close to India. They also wanted to disturb the excellent bilateral relationship between India as well as Bangladesh. So the article goes on to say that the perpetrators of crime who wanted to create chaos in Bangladesh wanted to exploit the religious polarization for their gains in order to meet their own agenda, says this article. But for the rest of the analysis, you can look into our past 1 week CNA. We have discussed about this issue in detail. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Kerala must rethink the very idea of development to prevent disasters threatening its future. Do you agree? Justify. HELI, which stands for High Efficiency Low Emissions Coal Technology, provides a pragmatic path that meets energy demands and lower emissions. Comment. So please write all your answers on the comment section. Peer review. Do give positive feedback to your friends' answers. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.